May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be ever pleasing in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. All right. I hope you all recognized the reading this morning, or at least that first prayer. It's one that we do kind of a lot. It's one that I think I do just about every day. It's kind of central to what we believe and how we practice our prayer life as Christians. And most pastors, when they hear this passage, are tempted to preach on just the Lord's Prayer part. I mean, it's got a lot of theological depth. There's a lot to unpack in those few sentences. It certainly is a good thing to talk about. But although our confirmation students aren't here, I would encourage you, if you really want to delve into the Lord's Prayer, to open your hymnals to the back where we have the small catechism. And Martin Luther gives a great explanation of the Lord's Prayer right there in your hymnal in the small catechism. Because I'm not going to be preaching about the Lord's Prayer this morning. Instead, I'd like to focus in a bit more on the story that happens after it. It's a very short parable, probably one of the shortest we have in the Bible. And it talks about a man whose friend shows up in the middle of the night, and the man is caught off guard. He has nothing to present before him, no hospitality, nothing to give. And this is long before the age of the 24-hour grocery store or apps like GoPuff or Grubhub, where you can just order it and have it come to you. Being caught without hospitality was kind of a no-no and a boo-boo and a bad thing. So this man runs out into the street, leaves his friend in the house to find someone who will give him a little bread to entertain his friend. You can imagine he's probably in his pajamas and his robe, running down Bustleton Avenue, knocking on doors until he gets to a friend. And he knocks on that door and he keeps knocking and knocking, hoping the friend will give him food. And eventually, the friend does come down, even though he has to get out of bed and leave his family and wake the household to give him some bread. Now the issue becomes, why does this friend decide to get out of his bed and do all this? And it kind of comes down to verse 8, if you look at verse 8. And verse 8 is kind of like a who's on first. Because we don't know which him and he's, it can get rather confusing. I tell you, even though he will not get up and give him anything, because he is his friend, at least because of his persistence, he will get up and give him whatever he needs. Which he is he here? Like, which one are we talking? It can get very circular and confusing in that verse. If I would try to translate it a little better, it would be something, I tell you, even though the one who is sleeping will not get up and give the one who is knocking anything, but because the one who is knocking is the one who is sleeping's friend, at least because of the one who is knocking's persistence, the one who is sleeping will get up and give the one who is knocking the bread. Still clear as mud, right? Basically, it comes down to the one who is knocking gets the bread. That's where this story ends. The one who is knocking receives what he needs to go and entertain his friend. He asks and he receives, he knocks and the door is opened. But why does he receive it? Well, in our reading for today, it says persistence. He knocks persistently. He knocks anxiously. He's persistent and he doesn't stop knocking till he gets what he wants. So persistence pays off. But if we apply that to our prayer life, does that really make sense? Because this passage is about prayer. This whole thing is about prayer. It starts with the Lord's Prayer, and the parable is about prayer, and then talking about asking for things and receiving the Holy Spirit. It's all a prayer passage. So if it's persistence, and we're the ones knocking on the door, and God's the one who's asleep in bed, first of all, that makes our prayers kind of seem like an annoyance to God, doesn't it? That's no good. Because prayer is not ever an annoyance. Prayer is about living a relationship with God. And persistence seems like work, doesn't it? Persistence seems like if we pray enough, if we check enough boxes, again, we're back to that works thing, aren't we, that we don't like. If we're persistent in prayer, we'll just get what we want. If we pray hard enough, if we knock hard enough, if we push hard enough against God and keep reminding God, because obviously God is forgotten, then we'll get what we need. Persistence is the wrong word. Because it comes down to a translation issue, and we're going to get into the Greek here. The language of the Bible is a hard thing to understand. I took 2.5 years of Greek, and I'm still no good at it. But we have to delve into language to kind of tease out what the real meanings are. And this word, persistence, is actually the Greek word, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, enaidia. It's used twice in the whole Bible. Twice. And the more infrequently a word is used in ancient Greek, the less we know about it, which makes it difficult, which means we have to use the context around the word a lot to try and figure out what it means or try and find it in other documents. And when it is used the other time in the Bible, it is not persistence, but shamelessness. It's not a persistent act, but a shameless act. Now, how does that change the whole story? Because quite frankly, the man is kind of shameless, isn't he? He's running around in his bathrobe in the middle of the night, shamelessly knocking on a neighbor's door, demanding bread. That is a shameless act, and it's certainly not something you should be doing at midnight or any time of the day, because he is disrupting this family's life. He is shamelessly saying, I am unprepared. Not only am I unprepared, I'm in my pajamas and I need your help. Shamelessly, here I am, someone help me. A shameless act, not a persistent one. And because of his shamelessness, he gets the bread he needs. It's not the persistence that gets the response. That's too much works. That's not how prayer ever works. But it's this man's deep understanding with his friend that he knows even in his wrongness, even in his aridness, even in his not being preparedness, he can show up at his friend's house at any time and his friend will give him what he needs. And isn't that what our relationship with God is about? Isn't that what our prayer life is about? That we can show up in front of God with any problem, with anything we've done wrong, with any issue, unashamedly, and say, I need help. And know that somehow, some way, God is going to respond. And God will respond in love. Every Sunday morning, we just did it. We stand or kneel in confession. And we say we have done wrong, and we shamelessly say we have done wrong. We know we do wrong, but we show up at God's doorstep and we say we need help. We may not stand in our pajamas, but we stand in our sin and say, help us, forgive us, love us, continue to support us. And every time, again and again, God brings the forgiveness, and God brings the grace, and God brings the love. God shows up with the bread. We knock, and the door is opened. We seek, and we find. Shamelessly. There is no problem that is too big for God. There is no sin that's too big that we can't stand in front of God shamelessly and say, I'm struggling. I did wrong and I need you to help me. Because that's what prayer is for. It's It's building up that relationship with God so that we can always stand in front of God and seek help. Just like we build up relationships with our friends and family. You have to practice that communication. It doesn't just form with friends. You have to work on it. There's going to be trying times where you might fight, but you keep communicating and you keep practicing and you keep loving and you build that relationship up. Your prayer life is your relationship with God, and it takes practice. But there are those people in our lives that we have relationships with that we can always go to with our problems and shamelessly say, help. And it usually took some practice to get there. It took some trust, it took some love to build up those relationships. And we can go in front of God with that same relationship. We go in front of God with that same prayer on our lips saying, I need help. So don't think of prayer as something you just have to check off as a box. Don't think of prayer as something you have to just keep doing and eventually it will work. It's not a persistent act. It is a shameless one.